It's on Twitter.
Okay, cool.
I'll paste it. I'll paste
Welcome,
it for you.
everybody. Well, we've started. Welcome, everyone. We're live, and this is Angela Serrano. I am Marisa Vikramanaka. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the first Australians as the traditional custodians of the country and continent, whose cultures are among the oldest living cultures in human history. I pay respect to the elders of the community and send my recognition to their descendants who are present. And yay, we're gonna kick off. This is Angela Serrano, who is a Filipino
Hi.
Australian freelance journalist and a creative writer whose work is in The Lifted Brow, Killings, Archer, Overland, etc., etc. She is a fine art model, which means we have something in common, and a circus
Awesome.
compulsion student, and we are not going to ask you to perform on camera, and a most dance, apparently the most dance crazy member of the Footscray Community Arts Centre's West Writers Group. You're supposed to be writing, not dancing. How can
I'm
you
the only
do
one who
that?
dances. They write. I dance.
Oh, um, she's working on a memoir trying not, which is called Trying Not to Jog in Place, about being raised by global pop culture while her parents parented each other. That starts in a Melbourne art gallery and ends at a Manila funeral. Now, I thought that sounded funny, but it ends at a funeral, so I'm kind of like, that,
Hmm.
you know, I hope it's not terribly awkward to write or anything, but we can talk about that later. And you can find her at Angelita Maldita at .tumblr.com and Angelita underscore Sarah on Twitter, where you can ask us more questions if we can't fit them all in here. We've got a question already. When do we stop writing home, and when does an immigrant slash migrant writer come home? We're going to talk about all those awesome things in a minute. Now, me, I'm Marissa Wickramanak. I'm a Sri Lankan Australian journal writer and editor. I write books, I edit books, and I do journalism work as well. And I'm on the board of the union, and I do a bit of organizing for Diverse Writers Australia, and I write sometimes when I get the chance to for Australian women writers. And I've written one book which was published when I was 17 years ago.
Awesome.
Just finished a novel, but we can talk about all of that later. So if you want to follow me, I'm at mvikranaka on Twitter. If you put in the DWF hashtag, you should find me. If you've got questions, hashtag DWF16. On and answering those questions as we go, so Angela, if you want to kick off, we decided we'd talk about why we came to Australia and why we choose to stay.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Marissa. I'm really happy to be here, and it's so great to meet you. So why we came to Australia? Um, I suddenly seem to have lost audio, but why we came to Australia? Why I came to Australia? I came to Australia in 2010 to do a PhD. So I got a scholarship to do a PhD in Melbourne, and I stayed because I got permanent residency and eventually citizenship, thanks to my husband, who is Filipino, who came to Australia. Well, he was my boyfriend then. Then he followed me to Australia and married me here. Then we got citizenship. Well, I got permanent residency, then he got citizenship. That's why I stayed. So I came to study and I stayed for love, is the story. Long and short of
Oh,
it.
that is so cute. So, how long ago was it when you came? How long have you
Uh,
been in Australia for?
I've been in Australia for 6 years.
6 years. I've been in Australia for 13 years now. I came in 2004 initially to study. I had PR at the time. I was lucky. I had studied
Yeah,
for 2 years before in the US, and it wasn't working out for me.
yeah.
And it just made more sense to come here. And so I ended up here, and I stayed. I, I ended up getting a partner here, but I don't think I stayed for love.
That's okay.
which is oh, horrible thing to say. My ex-partner was lovely, okay? Not a reflection on him. I don't know, I just stayed. It just never seemed to make much sense to go back home. And lots of people keep expecting me to go back home, keep asking me when that's going to happen. Um, and it just hasn't. And I guess because also I'm not doing the career people I think expected me to do. Really, they expected me to do something other than writing, something like banking or engineering or something something like that,
Yeah,
something else. Not a
something
creative pursuit
respectable and
necessarily.
middle class and high
Okay,
earning,
oh,
something
I
like
didn't
that.
go
Yeah.
there. You did. I didn't go there. So, what are the differences between here and home for you? Like with writing, are you talking to other writers back home? What is it like?
Well, but I just want to comment very briefly on that last point you made because I get the same thing too. People expect me as a Filipino, like when they find out I'm Filipino, they think, oh, are you a nurse or are you working in medicine or are you in accounting or some corporate middle class job that requires having had a Bachelor of Commerce, that sort of thing. They don't really expect people like me and people like us to be in the humanities, to be doing art for a living. Um, but yeah, moving on to your next question, do I communicate with writers back home? I do sometimes, and funnily enough, I the last Filipino writer I connected with was someone I had not seen for 10 years, and I caught up with him at the recently concluded Melbourne Writers Festival. So that was quite epic. And that was and before that, the other Filipino writer I spoke to was someone I had never actually met back in the Philippines, but whose work I was very familiar with. And I met him at last year's Melbourne Writers Festival as well. So it's funny when I get to have more contact with home now that I'm here in Melbourne. And and I find it more writers are curious about my writing now that I've settled here compared
Yeah.
to when I was back there in the Philippines.
I found it very strange because back home there is like there's such a small group of writers and we've got like about 3 4 different languages in the country. So there's Sinhala writers and Tamil writers, and I will write in English, which is my first language, which is another thing people don't expect about me. They're like, your first language is English. You're so articulate, and I'm like, yeah, yes I am. And I write in English, but there is a small group of people who write in English back home, and they all know each other. They all talk to each other. And obviously, I know of that circle, but I don't know many people in that circle. I haven't lived at home for 13 years, so how would I know them? Um, and because I think it's so tight knit, I think they're able to support each other. I think it works out well for them. But it's so interesting that it's small, that they all know each other, that there is that very, very small circle. And it's so funny because you don't see any of their work on the curriculum when you're growing up. You hardly ever know about these writers, and you discover them when you're older. And we have the Gold Lit Festival, which is going to be happening in January, and it's the third biggest literary festival in the world. And I think that has done amazing things to put a lot of those writers in touch with other writers, or at all different levels that come to this festival. We have big names and in the middle names and all of that sort of stuff. And I met a lot of writers that way when I went down a few years ago. And I kept in touch with some things. And I sort of slowly end up meeting them on Facebook and things like that, which is so weird because, again, I'm in another country like you, and I'm meeting all these other writers from across the world, from my country, from elsewhere, on Facebook and on social media. And I'm reading their work now because I never got to read it when I was in school, and it's very strange. What I would like to see more of is more translation from Sinhala into English and Tamil into English, so that I can also then read those works because there's a huge body of work. Those writers, the number of writers in those communities are much, much bigger than the English language writers at home. Because back home, if you're going to read an English language book, you're probably going to read a foreign author first rather than a local author. It's just
Yeah.
It's just the way it works, and I want to change that. That's part of what I want to do. So I find it very interesting that we don't see those translated works end up except for one or two classics, and we don't see that on the curriculum anywhere. And we're very, very rarely do we see. We need to read more of our own authors' work, whatever language they're writing in. It needs to be made more
Yeah.
accessible, I think, across all of the groups, and we have minority groups as well. I'd like to see some what they're writing as well. I don't know what people are writing. It's very frustrating, and I know what people here are writing, and I know I'm reading books by writers from centuries ago in other countries. Not just We're not just talking the UK and US. I'm reading uh, Japanese writing from the 18th century right now, and it's like I'm reading this, but I don't get to access a lot of my own country's writing in other languages. So I find that very strange. So, questions for
Yeah.
you now. What about the challenges you face in the kind of writing we do? We talked about before we started the thing, we emailed back and forth, and we talked. You had this great question about the challenges people face in what they write, and for you, it was memoir and fiction and creative writing, and for me, it was reportage and editing and so on. So, do you want to have a crack at that question first?
Yeah. Well, as one who writes, so I do two different types of writing at the moment. I'm doing freelance features journalism. Much of it is interview based. So so one of the biggest challenges in doing that kind of work that that you're chasing a moving object.
Yep.
Being able to have access to the subject, being able to get them comfortable with you, to trust you, and having a good rapport when they're so busy, when they're doing other things, sometimes really important things, and yet and I still have to be persistent to get the story, to get a quality story out of it, not just asking the same questions everyone else has asked and saying the same things everyone else is saying. That takes a lot of time, and if you're working freelance, you're doing a lot of labor for not a lot of love, for not a lot of cash. If I look at my hourly rate and look at if I look at what I'm getting for a single piece, and then I chop that up and I divided that by the number of hours that I've actually worked on it, then I'm saying, was I doing all that work for $10 an hour? Was I doing
Yeah.
all that work for $20 an hour? So but I do write for independent publications. That's the thing. Perhaps if I wrote for some more mainstream publications, I might be making a bit more money. But independent publications give me a lot more freedom in how I write or who I write about and what I say. And I love that freedom. And right now, I wouldn't trade that freedom for anything else. So that's the challenge of doing freelance features journalism for independent publications. And as for writing memoir, it's writing about my life is I've been through a lot of painful experiences. So I have to get back into those painful moments in my mind. I have to go over them again and again from different points of view, trying to figure out the smartest way to write about them, and also trying to be fair to the different people who were who were in those moments as well, who maybe have legitimate reasons to their minds for doing what they did, even if it hurt me very much. And that's a very difficult process to go through. And I'm unable to write a lot of memoir words in a day. Like with journalism, if it's about someone else, I'm able to bang out a pretty decent word count in a day. And I'm able to do a pretty fast turnaround, but with more personal literary writing, it's very hard. I have to really work very slowly. Like I have to feel the movement of my fingers on the keyboard, like feel more one with my machine. Whilst I do that and just try to be as honest as possible and as fair as possible. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard to be those two things very well at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is very hard. It's like when you have to go in journalism and do a TED Talk story, for example, like you're talking to people during hard times. One of the issues you mentioned was the whole freelance journalism thing, and that is an issue for me. It's an issue for I represent 130 freelancers who are members of the union, and this is an issue we talk about all the time. There's less and less work. When we find hard news stories, there's less places to send them to as well. It's very problematic in that way. And I just can't imagine the memoir side of things. Um, it must be really difficult when you have to talk about things that other people think are private. For example, how do you balance that when you're talking about things that maybe other people want to keep private and then you want to kind of talk about and expose to the rest of the world, and then there's that boundary. So I've always thought about writing memoir. First of all, I have no idea what kind of theme or book I would have it on. But then I'm also always aware that there are things that you want to keep private, and sometimes those are the most interesting things for the
Yeah.
readers of a memoir. Those are the things that keeps it. So how do you balance that between, like, hey, this is a great story to tell, but hey, this is very private, and even I want to keep it private, not just other people I'm talking about, or who are involved in the whole thing. How do you manage that?
Well, I, you know what? Once the book is out, I'm gonna tell you right now. But right now, I don't really have easy answers. I, but
No.
it's funny because when when I think of as private, to me, it's not really what other people might think of as being very private. Like I
Mm-hmm.
like when I write about my family's financial situation, for example, I think that's really private and really, really delicate because
Yep.
parents want to be known as good providers for their children. But what if a lot of problems that you had growing up had to do
Yep.
with an inability, like their inability to provide, say, comfort or love or financial support during really important times. And maybe that wasn't always their choice or their fault, but when you're a child, what you see what you're seeing, you see what feels like a betrayal. And now that I'm adult writing about this, now that I'm adult and I can see what it's like, how hard it is to earn money and to keep to keep money in the bank, to be able to shoulder all expenses. I'm able to understand where they were coming from. So, and it's funny because people will think, oh, you know, a good memoir should be about sex. It should be about should have the most salacious things. And I like reading and writing about sex too. Don't get me wrong, but I but my memoir isn't about that. So maybe no one's gonna read it. And that's okay if people don't want to read it. I'd rather have readers that want to read my work than readers that don't want to read my work, or readers that come expecting something and walk away disappointed. So going back to ask how I deal with the private public thing, I just think that um, what makes pain so private is that you think you're the only one that's experiencing it. You come from this kind of moral high ground where you feel like your suffering is superior to everyone else's suffering. So what I try to do, and I don't know if I'm still very good at it, I'm still learning, but what I try to do is try to look at suffering as a public issue, something that maybe everyone has an idea about, but not in the same way. So I try to make my suffering speak to someone else's suffering. So maybe we don't understand each other, but maybe the point is not to say, I understand you or I get you, but that I'm here with you. We're kind of in a similar place. Let's look at each other. Let's talk to each other.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of that, like, okay, I may not fully understand where you come from and what you're doing, but I understand this situation you've been in, and I can
Yeah.
follow along, and I
Or,
can sort of relate. Um,
or like I see that your pain is important
yeah,
to you and I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
see like where that's coming from, or I see that you're in pain and I'm
yeah,
not going to laugh at that at the
yeah,
very least.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm still hung up
Oh,
on your
oh,
sex
that's
joke.
okay. Oh, that's okay. Do you want to talk about that? Have you ever written about sex in your um?
I have written about sex. I have written. In fact, I used to practice my erotica on fan fiction because I think fan fiction is a great place to learn how to write certain sort of things before you start writing your own work. And I was lucky enough to find a fandom because I don't even consider myself a big fan girl. If I like something, and I don't go big at all obsessive over it, except unless it's cats. I like cats. I
Yeah.
love
Oh,
cats.
me too. Ah.
Yeah.
Is your cat
Uh,
there? Can you say hi to it?
oh no, my cat's upstairs and
No,
she's
no, no. That's fine. That's
asleep.
fine. That's
Oh,
fine.
I'm sorry.
Otherwise, they might have to invoice the festival as well. If the cat makes an appearance, the cat might have to invoice the festival. So,
She will take her weight in cat food. That's her going rate.
all
Um,
right.
but I found it really interesting because I used to write a weekly column on politics and philosophy and life in Australia because uh, people used to want to know what life was like and they wanted to migrate here and they thought it would be a great idea for me while I was living here to write something. So I did that for 4 years every week, and sometimes I would be stumped for ideas because it was pretty much up to me, and so I would write to them and I'd say, hey, tell me what to. And at one point I did get an answer back saying, hey, write about sex. And I'll get, no. It was really weird, and I understood what they were kind of wanting. They wanted something, like I said, I think salacious, interesting, something I hadn't done before. But I thought, no, look, that part of my life is private, first of all. And second, I do not wish to really shock conservative society in Sri Lanka. I'm sorry, like I'm already making them a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You don't need to push people too far. If you ask me to write a sex advice column, that's a totally different kettle of fish. I'd be quite happy to try and do that. Um, but I really didn't know what I could say about sex in that sort of column except to say, hey, people are a little bit more freer with it here, and the general view of society is this. But, like beyond that, to say anything about it was, I really didn't even know where to begin. But it's so interesting that you bring this up, like, oh, sex will sell something. Yeah, and I keep wondering, like, I've actually finished a novel right now, and someone's editing it for me, and hopefully I'll win an award. I've entered it into a competition and stuff. But I've been working on it for
Great.
12 years, and
Congrats.
it does have a kind of sex scene and an erotic scene in it, and I don't think it's that erotic. It gets the point across, okay?
That's
it was
organized reading.
it wasn't meant to be tantalizing, but I kind of wondered whether, hey, saying that I've got a lesbian sex scene in this book is actually going to help me sell stuff. Like, that has popped into my head because I'm sure somebody at some point is going to turn to me and say that's going to be a huge selling point. And I'm going to be going, but that's not the point of the book. Why would I want someone to buy the book and turn to page whatever and just read
Yes.
that scene? Why would I want that? But you know what? I've decided if you're gonna buy the book, I don't even care if you use it to prop up the coffee table. Just if you're gonna buy the book, buy the book. After that, it's
Yeah.
your business. Like, what do I care?
Yeah.
But I don't like the idea of finding something particularly salacious, whether it's sex or violence or anything else, to sell a memoir, sell a book, anything. I feel the story must come first. So if you have a story and you have something to say, like I think you have to, that has to come first. I think that's priority. You know,
Yeah.
anything else like sex and violence, if it's in it and it's marketable, whatever, that's an added bonus. But I've had people, and this comes to our writing courses question because you asked about writing courses. And I never took a writing course, and then I realized I took a writing class. I took a creative writing class because I did literature as a degree, and I wrote short stories. And at one point, the teacher did ask me to exoticize my
Oh
writing, to put
gosh.
something more sexy in it, and to, because I was writing about people of color as well, to kind of spice them
Oh.
up a bit. And I just thought, nah, no, look, I'll take a lower grade. I don't mind. Yeah, like everyone else in the class is fine. I still got a great grade, but like I was a bit turned off by that, and I was
Yeah.
really sad. I didn't want to think that that was how the industry would work once I got up because he was published. He was quite well known and published, and so I was quite sad about that. Has that ever
Gosh.
happened to you? That's
I'm
my
so.
experience of a writing course. I don't know
Oh.
what's happened to you.
Oh, look, I'm so sorry to hear that, Marissa. That is such
No, that's
a
fine.
terrible
Got
thing. I'm
over it.
so glad that you brought that up because now, people hear us talk back and know that it's not okay. I,
Yeah.
I am not a creative writing major. I like my bachelor's degree was in development studies, but I did a lot of English literature subjects and I did a few creative writing classes in the Philippines. And I've done a bunch of writing workshops in Australia as well. I've never had that particular experience in a writing workshop, but I'm going to tell you this. The first poetry reading I went to in Australia turned out was well, incidentally, it was an erotic poetry reading. Okay, but wait. It was
Okay.
not, I didn't find the poems that were read very sexy, but that's me. For some people, maybe that turns them on, maybe that doesn't turn me on. It's fine. But I was quite upset when one of the poems that was being read was a poem about this a poem by this middle-aged Caucasian poet writing about a an encounter with a Balinese prostitute, and sorry, sex worker. My bad.
It's fine. Whatever.
And then anyway, and he was acting like it was an equal relationship. The way he was talking about the encounter, and I do not know, like anything about the Balinese sex worker. But that was the point of the poem, that her point of view didn't matter. She was not even a character in the poem. She was just someone that he wanted to talk about as someone that he had had sex with and made him look good. He was talking about how walking down the beach with her, he felt like they looked like a good looking couple. And I was like, um, I was the only Southeast Asian looking person in the fucking room. Oh, sorry, Jane. I hope I don't know what the language restrictions are, but I apologize for that. And I was thinking, well, I'm not Indonesian, but someone might think that I am. But whatever I am, I'm Asian, and I'm offended by this. And I never, I stayed out of the literary scene. I didn't submit anything to any publication. I didn't go to any more poetry readings. I was just, that was at that time I was still doing my PhD, so I was just thinking, you know what, I'm just gonna bury my head in academic books. Screw the literary world. If this is what Melbourne literati is like, then I don't want to be part of it. And then later, during the Emerging Writers Festival, I went to a poetry night workshop with this wonderful American poet who was, and he really liked the poem I read, and he said, Angela, you can do this. He was very supportive. He was a wonderful and interesting person, and I realized, okay, they're not all like that in the Melbourne literary scene. And so I stuck around and I started sending my work to people and getting published. But that was really, that experience at that poetry room was quite jarring and quite upsetting. And up to now, I'm still a bit like iffy around poets. But not all. I
Like,
actually have quite a few poet friends. So anyway, back to you.
oh, I'm so sorry you had to go through. I'm so sorry it kept you away from the scene. And I think that's important for people to understand that it's one small comment or it's person doing something daft. But, if you're a writer, it throws you off. If you are not a writer, it makes you think that this stuff is okay. I've been hailed down the street as people saying, hey, come get together, don't, because you're going to be good in bed. And like, they think these sort of pickup lines and things are okay. And it's ideas that come through, and they come through our popular culture, so movies, music, television shows, and books. If you have these ideas, they do seep into the rest of the world. that watches them, that consumes them, and then people just carry on and use them. And it's, I don't think people understand the connection, and they don't believe that it is actual proper tenuous connection. Like they feel it's a very fragile connection to make. And I'm like, no, ideas are very strong things. They're very, very strong things.
Yeah.
If you've ever talked to someone who has a different viewpoint from you on anything, doesn't matter what it is, trying to change their mind, and that's an idea. Like, so trying to change their viewpoint, that's hard. You can't change someone's perspective. So, and then you have to put up with it.
Yeah.
What is dangerous is then that ideas, people's ideas become habits and attitudes, and then those end up becoming, if someone is working in a particular arena of life, that becomes a hiring policy at a company, that becomes a governmental policy
Yeah.
for something, for a law, that becomes somebody's rationale. And even science is not excluded from this. It can be a rationale for a hypothesis that then goes on to conclude a biased experiment. Um, and I see a lot of this because I also do science journalism work.
Yeah.
And so you always have to question those things as well. Where is your idea coming from? What premise is it founded upon? What are the basic ideas on which this wonderful question you're trying to research exists on? And it gets into law. These ideas are serious. They can be, especially if they're not true.
Yeah.
Or if they're too narrow, and they only talk
Yeah.
about a tiny segment of a group rather than the whole broad variety therein. For example, now everybody probably thinks Sri Lankans are refugees, and I'm not a refugee, for example. And people, when I get into a cab, ask me which side of the war I was on. I'm like, I was lucky to be
Oh.
born into a side where I didn't have to become a child soldier, where my family wasn't
Yeah.
broken up, where I wasn't
Yeah.
inundated with civil war issues necessarily, even though I had a few bomb blasts or whatever. So I was luckier than other people. But I never got to choose a side. I was just born when I was born. Like, no, even when there was an election happening, nobody ever got to elect a side that genuinely was from the other side in that sense. It wasn't like they lined everybody up and said this party from this section and this party from that side of the wall, vote for whoever. It doesn't work like that. Um, and you grow up knowing that there are people who are less lucky than you, who have gone through trauma and all sorts of stuff, and this is a war neither one of you chose. But I still get that people have such a simplistic idea of the way the world works, and where you fit
Yeah.
into it, because these ideas persist about who you are and where you're from and what that means. Then that's why
Yeah.
people are surprised we speak English as a first language, for example.
Yeah.
They're surprised that we choose to work as writers. They're surprised we're articulate. They're very, very surprised all the time. They're constantly surprised. And
Yeah.
I do feel bad. I don't know if you feel this too, but I feel bad because I'm also not a meek and quiet person. I'm quite opinionated, and I will state my case. And I feel very bad because I feel like the moment I walk into someone's life, I'm going to make them uncomfortable. They're going to have to confront some idea somewhere about what they thought about the world that maybe they never paid attention to. That, and it's
Yeah.
always hard to accept that maybe something isn't the way you thought it was, and have
Yeah.
to change that. And I feel like just existing sometimes in people's lives brings that up, and I feel very sorry and very bad. Like, that's not. I don't want to make people uncomfortable, but I understand that sometimes I accidentally do.
Well, if they feel uncomfortable, if they're uncomfortable, that's on
It's
them.
because it's an uncomfortable thing. Even I've had to change an idea I've had in my head, for example. Like, that's an uncomfortable thing. Knowing how uncomfortable it is, I don't want anyone else to go through that. But it is inevitable when you come across an idea that, uh, when you realize an idea you've held for a while is not quite right or not quite true, or something you need to change, whatever it might be. So you're writing your memoir. Very quickly, you're writing your memoir. What else are you writing about or doing? What are you reading? It's
Um, so much. I'll start by talking about what I'm writing. I'm really excited about two articles that are coming out in print in December, and most of my publications have been online actually. So if you go to my Twitter profile page, there's a link to all my publications there. But I'm really excited to have two print publications coming out in December. One in Archer magazine and one in the Lifted Brow. So yeah, one is interview based, and one is a memoir. So those are the projects that I'm working on. And what am I reading? I want to show you. I'll just try. Uh, oh, are you reading it as well? It was a birthday gift from a friend.
I'm not reading it yet, but I'm excited because diverse authors reading diverse authors. We need more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's always nice to see someone reading diverse authors. I'm reading Shamini Flint right now, but I've actually got over 20 books in a pile in my room on a table that I'm supposed to be reading. Over 20,
Cool.
like seriously, like three, four piles, and it's all huge and stacking up. And I have to read them, and some I have to review. And if I was upstairs right now, I would be able to show you the whole horrible pile. I think I'm never gonna get through them, no matter how fast I read. So I'm excited. So you got memoirs, you got articles. Okay, so I finished my novel, and I'm trying
Yeah.
to write a fiction novel set in Sri Lanka, which is
Oh,
amazing.
that's exciting.
I'm trying. Trying being the operative word. I haven't started yet.
Is that
So
a
someone
genre
need.
in Sri Lanka, crime fiction, or is it a
Um,
very
as
popular genre? Or
it's very popular genre anywhere in the world. I think lots of people do read crime fiction, but I haven't known anyone to write crime fiction set in Sri Lanka yet. So I might be the first. I don't know. Like I said, if I haven't read widely within my own community yet, how would I know? But maybe I will be the first. I don't know. And I've got great ideas, and I'm hoping I can pull it off. But someone needs to keep me on track and say, "Yeah, have you done it yet?" You know.
yeah,
Uh, Apart from that, Diverse Writers of Australia, I'm
yeah,
involved with that. We're organizing that. So that's a list of diverse people of color, cultural and linguistic diversity, disability, queer community, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander writers. And we're trying to level the playing field for them. So that's what that's about, and I'm trying to organize that and sort out my freelancers from here. And yeah, it's a lot of voluntary work and unpaid work. And you were asking, why do we do work that isn't lucrative? Why do we write when no one earns any money from it? Um, it's difficult. I don't know why I do it. I wish I had an answer because sometimes I wake up in the morning and go, where the hell am I going to get money from to pay my rent, my bills, my food, whatever today, the cat, you know, what am I going to do? I don't know. I think it's that constant worry as well because I'm a solo freelancer, so I don't depend on my partner from income or anything like that.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. How do you manage?
Um, well, I'm quite lucky that my partner is working full time, and if he wasn't, then I wouldn't be able to do this. But it's also when he came here to Australia, he couldn't get work because we were both on student visas, and a lot of corporate jobs will only hire you uh, if you have permanent residency. So he was actually very very qualified. Like he had heaps of experience in all these great international organizations, and HR professionals would tell him that they really liked his resume, but that they couldn't hire him just yet because he didn't have a permanent residency. So I was the one working like with my scholarship money and with my teaching work. I was able to support the both of us for a while, and eventually he was able to get a really good job, which was offered in his field, which was offered to him by uh, by someone who also was from an immigrant background. So that was really that's a really nice story of someone who has from an immigrant background helping a new immigrant get quality, secure work. And ever since then, he's been fortunate to be able to get quality work, and I've been fortunate to be able to focus on doing independent literary writing because otherwise I would have to do other stuff. And with life modeling, I that's actually my primary source of income right now. It's so funny. Yeah, I think more people would want to pay to see me naked rather than pay to read my words. I don't know if it's the same with you.
Oh, it's great. And I think the reason why people want me to model as an artist, and I don't get anything regular out of it at all. So maybe the scene is not quite the same as it is here. And I think they like to have variety as well. So
Mm,
um, people generally like the fact that I'm darker skinned because they get to do shadows and anatomy very
yeah,
differently. And so, and provided it's warm enough, it's easy.
yeah,
Because the last thing you want to do is freeze while you're holding a pose, and like you have to
yeah,
hold a pose for 20 minutes at the most, right? Um, and you have to lie down for those ones. But it is a form of exercise because you're staying in one place
yeah,
for so long, and it hurts so
yeah,
is. But it's fun. I do find it fun. I talk to people. I've had my glasses off as well at times, so it's. I think that helped initially when I first did it as well. But I'm happy you get regular work out of it. I don't get regular work, but I have done it, and I've done portraits as well. They find my facial structure interesting for some reason. I don't
yeah,
know. I haven't done it for a while though, so maybe I need to email people. But I think partly because there are quite a few groups, but they've got quite a lot of models. They like variety, so I don't often get things weekly. I
yeah.
would love to make it a regular thing, um, but also I think my mother would go through the roof.
Does she know?
Yeah, she knows I didn't want.
Oh, sorry.
No, no, it's not bad. Okay, on to questions really quickly. Jasmine
Yeah.
Sahid asked, when do we stop writing home, and when does an immigrant/migrant writer come home? But just before that, Elizabeth T asked whether she could see my cat, and I will tweet a picture of my cat
Yay.
with the hashtags if anybody wants to see my cat called Trouble. She's called Trouble because she is Trouble. She's
Oh,
Trouble
I love it.
Vikramanaka. All the letters come from
I
the
love
Vets
it.
to Trouble Vikramanaka. Um, I have a picture of her so that everyone can see. So if you follow the hashtag, you'll see her. I'm sorry I couldn't pick her up or whatever, but she's grumpy and grouchy and prone to scratching me. So on to Jasmine Sahi's questions. When do we stop writing home? And when does an immigrant migrant writer come home? When do
Okay.
they? When do we stop
Um,
writing home? Writing about home, I'm assuming. That's what she means. When do we stop writing about home?
um, I am going to try to answer the question. I'm going to try to answer what I think Jasmine is asking.
Yeah.
I think it's a question of audience and rootedness. I don't think of myself as writing home, but but one thing I've appreciated about working with excellent editors, I've been very, very fortunate to have worked with amazing editors throughout my writing career. And I always feel, and whenever they ask me questions or give feedback, I realize what I've been doing that I wasn't aware of. And I realize that I have this imagined audience that knows things about me and that we have inside jokes that a general audience doesn't understand. Then I have to spell things out a bit more for the general audience. And so when I think about writing home, I think perhaps maybe I'm writing to my mother and father, maybe because my father has died and my mom is
Oh,
alone overseas, and so maybe I think I'm writing to tell her things about myself that I don't think she knows, and maybe I'm writing to my father to tell him things that I know he doesn't know. So,
yeah.
and when I think about writing home, I think about writing home to the womb or writing home to the itch in my dad's pants, and I'm trying to speak to that experience of being ejected from that space. And when do I
Oh,
come home? I don't know. Maybe when I'm dead, I come home. Maybe when I go to the grave and I figure out where I want to be buried. Maybe that's when I'll finally have come home.
that's interesting because I don't know where I want to be buried either, and I don't know where home is anymore because home was a place, and it's very true. You can't go back home. Things have changed quite a lot,
Yeah,
and even Australia doesn't feel like home. And home is partly who I'm with, how I feel, and also a place. And it's very weird because I'm here for 13 years, and the itch to move on is still here. The itch to try another place, try and find a place I
yeah,
find to be home. Writing about home, I think I don't think I'm going to stop writing about Sri Lanka or Sri Lankan characters because I think it's important. I grew up having to read Western literature, which is predominantly, I'm sorry to say, you have to bring color
It's okay.
into
Yeah.
this way, but
Go
white
for it.
people,
Go for it. Yeah.
white Western people, and
Yeah.
I am sorry, I am very Western on the inside, but I am
Yeah.
brown on the outside,
Feel like
and
you're
I
like a
get
sexy
treated.
Oreo cookie, aren't you?
Oh, we say coconut. I was called
Coconut.
coconut
Okay. I'm
or
a
bounty.
banana. Yeah.
Bounty bar
Oh, okay.
is the other thing I've heard. So that's just my mom's Euro Asian mix, and so and my dad was taught in a English boarding school despite being single Sri Lankan, so that's why that mentality is in my head, and that's how I was raised. Um, so I'm already a bit of an outsider, weirdo person in traditional society. Anyway, I want to write about people who are brown. I want them. I want people to be able to pick up my books and see themselves or people they know in them. I don't want people to have to go looking for something relatable in a white person or to hope that other authors will write characters so that the skin color doesn't matter, so that you feel like these could be anyone anywhere. Which
Yeah.
I think, that there was the furor over Hermione Granger in I think one rendition, film rendition being cast as an African American or
Yeah.
African British woman.
Yeah.
And Rowling came out and said, well, I never said she was always going to be
Yeah.
white in the book, so she can
Yeah.
be any. So, instead of waiting for authors to try and have to state that or try to do that in their work, why not put people of color in?
Yeah.
Why not make them protagonists? Sometimes they are the protagonists. In my last one, I have three main characters. Two are Sri Lankan protagonists. One is a British one. I hope I've done the British one justice. I don't know. um, like in my crime fiction book, the two protagonists, most of them are going to be Sri Lankans. Actually, if I ever write that book, I started writing another one called Him, which is going to be one Australian who's the only protagonist, but coming up, the secondary character is going to be another Sri Lankan, and I'm writing about queer people because I identify as being part of the queer community. I am,
Mm.
um, how shall I put it? I am pan and genderqueer, but I'm happy with she. And so I want to put queer people in, I want to put diverse people in, and I feel like there has to be a code of ethics about how you do that, and I think it needs to be done. So I don't think I'm going to
Yeah.
stop writing home in that way. I may be writing about other places, but I'm going to be trying to put Sri Lankan people in those places if I'm not
Yeah.
setting them in Sri Lanka. When do I come home? I go home every so often to visit, sometimes to work as a journal, and I'm going to cover politics and things like that. But I don't know. When do I still call it home, but I don't think it's anywhere I can make a permanent home yet. But this keeps coming up because it's like if I can't make a living here with journalism going the way it is, then how do I make a living at all? Like I might need to go home and make a living as a journal, which might be easier there, more financially viable there than it is here at the moment. Um, but I would have to leave behind a lot of other things that I do pursue because I believe they're important, even if they annoy me at times. So the organization I do for the union, voluntary work for DIWA and uh, Australian women writers and things like that, those are all important things to me. So it's always the, my answer is I don't know. I don't know. Someone make the choice for
Yeah.
me. So is there anything you want to say really quickly? Because it's 10:30, so we have to wrap up. And we're sorry for starting late because we had technical issues.
Yeah. Well, I what do I want to say? Well, I just want to say um, that I really enjoyed chatting with you, Marissa, and I really enjoyed that your responses to the questions, especially that last bit. That's about being an outsider and being an outsider at home and being an outsider in Australia
Here.
and
It is
And
the
yet,
theme of my life. I'm constantly an outsider. There you go. That's the hook for my memoir.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so continue. What were you saying? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I was also just gonna say that I have a lot of questions for you, but maybe we're gonna take them offline, But yeah, yeah, and
We can have a question answer session on Twitter if people want to join in. They can join in.
yeah,
I
sure,
am
sounds great.
M Vikramanayake, MWIKRAMANAYAKE. On Twitter, if you follow the DWF hashtag, you'll find it. And Angela is Angelita_Sarah. It's exactly as it sounds. SERRA at the end. And if you follow hashtag DWF16, you will find us. You'll be able to ask us questions. We can have a continue Q&A
Yeah,
chat,
absolutely.
probably.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you for chatting to me and Angela. Thank you to DWF for letting us do this and to Jane for setting it up and
yeah,
coping with the
thanks,
tech
Jane.
issues.
Thanks for having us.